So let's talk about the NBA Defensive Player of the Year this season. As I said, I'm going to run down through the awards. The league is basically over, and we know who's going to win most of the awards by now. And if you guys don't know, Rudy Gobert is winning the Defensive Player of the Year. Controversially, the only people who really think that he should win this are the media, because he this season, even though he's been a great defensive player, and you can't deny the impact that he's had over the Minnesota Timberwolves when it comes to their team defense, you do have to say that there is a clear guy which makes an argument for being one of the best defenders of all time. That right now. First, with Rudy Gobert, his argument is he's the best player, the best defender, on the best defensive team in the league, and the way that he's impacted their defense as an individual has been great enough to the point where he is the best defender this season. It's a good argument. Honestly, when you argue it, he's getting 4 offensive rebounds a game, 2 steals, no, a steal, 1 steal, 2 blocks. Meanwhile, being a complete game changer defensively and being one of the better players at defense and at being able to block off a paint entirely. He obviously gets the nod because of his team defense. As you guys know, the Defensive Player of the Year award has turned into who's the best defender on the best team. That's why Marcus Smart won it. That's why Jaren Jackson Jr. won it. And a big reason as to why that is because there has been a clear inclination to make the Defensive Player of the Year award the same as the MVP, in the sense that it's not about what you're doing individually. It's not about, you putting up the big numbers. It's about what your team is doing with the numbers that you're putting up. I personally don't agree with this, as I do think that historically, yes, great defenders are on great defensive teams, but I do believe that one guy having defensive impact matters way more than what a team defense is doing. Because, like we know, if we're taking it based on team defense, then the Warriors should have had way more Defensive Player of the Year awards. So then it's like, what are we doing there? Right? And then we look at another team. We look at other teams historically which have been great at defense, like the Bulls, and other teams which have had great defensive players, great defensive stars. But will you ever say that there should have been people winning the Defensive Player of the Year over a guy like Kawhi Leonard, even though the Spurs were not the number 1 defensive team in the league? And I'm talking about 2015 when he won the Defensive Player of the Year and the Spurs were the number 2 defense. Of course, that is an example where it is more based on individual performance. And yes, the Defensive Player of the Year has always kind of been based on the best team. But this season, there's a clear argument against that logic. The reason why is because we're seeing a player that's so good at defense that teams literally have to game plan so they do not run by this player at all. And of course, by that player, I'm talking about Victor Wembanyama. Rudy Gobert is great. He's shown consistently, very consistently, that he can anchor the greatest defenses in the league and be effective and still have room to, affect the game defensively in a variety of ways. Yes, he's a paint protector first, but if we're being honest, he's gotten much better at going to the perimeter than he was earlier in his career. And his effectiveness when it comes to shot blocking, when it comes to deferring people from the paint, is very good. Like, it's one of the best of all time. like Rudy Gobert gets a lot of hate because he's kind of unlikable. He's French. I'm joking, by the way, but when I say he's French, it's because people say like, oh, he's this French like stupid dude who is like unlikable, and I don't know why they bring up so much that he's French, but I'll leave them to it. So it's like when you see him, you're like, okay, he's great. And he is one of the best defensive players of all time when it comes to award based defensive numbers. When it comes to individual skill, we're talking about a different conversation. So, the other player, Victor Wembanyama, is statistically the best defender on earth. He's averaging 3.6 blocks. He's basically averaging 4 blocks a game, a steal, meanwhile getting 2 offensive rebounds, and basically being the anchor to a San Antonio Spurs defense where this year they're 23rd and last year they were 30th. So that means that with Wembanyama, they've been 7 places better in their defensive rating. Now, I don't understand how you can look at the clear numbers and say, well, is Wembanyama not the player? I understand how you would say that. What I don't understand is how are we not looking at how they play now with Wemby. With Wemby, they've changed because last season the Spurs were terrible defensively, and they still are. But getting your team 7 places up, getting your team from the last defensive place, and making it so that they go now 7 points up from that, it makes it so that we have to beg the question of, are the Spurs now having this impact just because of Wemby? And we can see that, yes, that is the case. Most of the starting lineup hasn't changed. Most of the key players which play for the Spurs haven't changed. And they've really kept the same group of guys around Wemby that were there last year because obviously they're hoping to get Wemby a partner. And he's going to be so good next season that you need to abuse the fact that you have this bad of a team to get good players through the draft, or if not, you'll be stuck with a LeBron effect. If you guys don't know, the LeBron effect is when a player is so good that they do not allow you to get draft picks, but they are also so important that they need you to get players around them. It happened to LeBron in Cleveland. But anyway, as I was saying, the defensive player of the year in this season is a tricky one. I believe that it will, in the end, go to Rudy. That's what odd makers say. That's what the people say. But when it comes to really, putting it into perspective and giving context to the award of who has individually affected their team more, I do believe that there's an edge going to Wembanyama. As we see, Rudy Gobert in his team, there are some great perimeter defenders around him. And they are the best defensive team in the league. And honestly, I believe that a big reason for that is because of the surgence of Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards defensively as perimeter guys. Not everyone, because last season they were just sending everyone to Gobert. And this season they've had the leverage of actually being able to take teams and put them in the perimeter, make them shoot hard shots, and make them force things which you would not want your team to force normally. We do see that having this player in Gobert has made them beneficial. So now that begs the question, who should be the defensive player of the year? If you think of team defense as the most important thing, then you should definitely root for Gobert. He has the better team with the better defense. They're the first in defense, and you can't argue against that. But on the other end, you have Wembanyama, and if you like stats and if you like what an individual player is doing, then Wembanyama is the Defensive Player of the Year for you. And I do think that even though we have this debate, Rudy's going to win it just because of the NBA and how it is.